Okay, good morning class. Welcome back to the session. We are discussing governance, and under governance today I am focusing upon the core issues related to elections, and we are still covering certain parts of the RPA. Some parts of the RPA we have already covered, some parts of the RPA we are now starting to, beginning to cover. So we'll take a look at some of these aspects. Article 324, as all of you know, talks about the Election Commission of India. Oh yes, before I forget, I'm sorry, my bad. I feel that within the RPA 1951, sorry, my apologies to you, RPA 1951, when we had covered yesterday the questions about qualifications and disqualifications. Yesterday, when we had covered the questions of qualifications and disqualifications in RPA 1951, we had taken a look at what you can call Section 7, Section 8, Section 8A, Section 9, 9A, 10, 10A, and Section 11 was something that we had to cover yesterday. We had not completely covered Section 11 yesterday, right? So let me just introduce to you what Section 11 states, okay, so that we can complete that entire range. Section 11 of RPA 1951. And this is in a way related to what we are discussing about the elections issue today, which is with regard to what is the election commissions and the powers of the election commission and the procedure for filing the election petition. Section 11 says that if the election commission wants under Article 324, if the election commission wants, it can remove or remove the disqualification, can remove the disqualification of any person disqualified under Section 8 to 10A, or reduce the disqualification remove the disqualification of any person from from disqualification under Section 8 to Section 10A, and reduce the disqualification period of any person. Under Section 8 to Section 10A. Okay? Under Section 8 to Section 10A. Okay? Here is a point about it. This section will not cover Section 8A. The powers of the election commissions will not be there with regard to with regard to corrupt practices in elections. Okay, please take a look at this. This is a simple understanding of section 11 of the RPA 1951. Just take a look at this and maybe I'll explain it again for you. You see, what this means is that section 11 gives election commission the power to remove the disqualification or to reduce the duration of the period of disqualification for all sections from 8 to section 10A. The only factor is that this section does not apply to section 8A. If a person has been punished for corrupt practices or has been disqualified for corrupt practices during elections, like manipulating the elections, etc., etc., this section will not apply to that person. Okay? So this is what we are taking a look at in terms of understanding the questions about section 11 of the RPA 1951. So I feel this is something that concludes it for us. Now we can start with the next part, which is about Article 324. In Article 324, we are taking a look at the Election Commission of India. I'm sure that you have covered the Election Commission of India. Yesterday I had given you a synopsis of what had to be covered in this entire range. For example, I had said Article 324 to Article 329 we'll cover certain aspects very briefly, and then we'll take a look at sections of the RPA which deal with election petitions, which is section 80A, section 80, section 98, 99, 100, 101 and 116A. Okay, so this is an entire range of this is the entire range of things that we're trying to cover in terms of the elections, right? Once we wind up this chapter, we'll distribute notes upon this chapter clearly. Okay. Okay, red color is not visible. I'll take note of that, Biswajit. Thank you for your pointer. Right. ठीक. Now the question that we are asking over here is with regard to the elections, with the election petitions and election commissions, right? Now please just give me a cue whether in this subject, when we were discussing with the chapter subjects of polity, have you covered Article 324 or not? And if you have covered Article 324, please give me a brief understanding how much of that article have you covered? How much of Article 324 and Election Commission have you covered, so I can take it accordingly with that respect? With regard to the Election Commission of India, we have these points and structures that we need to remember. Okay. Number one is, what is the nature of the constitutional body which is the Election Commission of India? What is the nature of the constitutional body? Please give me a hint as to, please class, please help me out here. How much in depth do you want me to take on the Election Commission so that I can get a clear understanding of what my scope can be over here? Before I start on, please give me a understanding of how much would you personally want me to go into the question of the Election Commission and the Supreme Court judgment recently on the Election Commission appointment, etc., etc. Election Commission is a constitutional body, which means that it is mandated to be formed by the Constitution. Okay, so what basically it means is that it is a constitutional body which is mandated to be formed by the Constitution, means that the Election Commission shall be constituted, and there is no way that the President or the Parliament cannot comply with the orders of the Constitution. Okay, recently I'll give you an example of what a constitutional body is. A constitutional body is a body which is supposed to be formed mandatorily and necessarily under the provisions of the Constitution. That's what the definition of a constitutional body is. Okay. Now, when we take a look at, for example, recently there has been a huge chaos about the Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha. Okay. Now, Article 93 of the Constitution states that the Lok Sabha shall, as soon as may be, choose among itself a speaker and a deputy speaker. Okay. So, the term that is used in the language of Article 93 is that the Lok Sabha shall choose a deputy speaker. Okay. So, the question therefore is that whether it is mandatory for the Lok Sabha to choose a deputy speaker or not. Though a timeline for the choosing of the deputy speaker has not been given, is it mandatory for the Lok Sabha to choose a deputy speaker? That is the question. Okay. And to answer that question, we have seen recently that the Supreme Court of India has clearly stated out that deputy speaker is a constitutional body, and not choosing a deputy speaker within 5 years of Lok Sabha is a violation of the Constitution, is unconstitutional. Okay. So, what it basically, the Supreme Court said very categorically, the term in Article 93 says, shall, the Lok Sabha shall as soon as may be. So, even if the Lok Sabha does not determine the time period within which it has to choose the, what you can call the deputy speaker, the fact that the Lok Sabha has to choose the deputy speaker within 5 years of its composition, of its constitution, is a constitutional mandate. So, you cannot not have a deputy speaker. Clear? That's the point. Now, when we take a look at this with regard to the Election Commission of India and other constitutional bodies, the term that is used in all these constitutional bodies is shall. Right? There shall be a constitution of India, there shall be an Election Commission of India, and the Election Commission of India shall be constituted necessarily. So, the President or the Parliament cannot not constitute an Election Commission of India, and that is what makes it a constitutional body. The definition of constitutional body is not that every body which is mentioned in the Constitution. There are certain bodies mentioned in the Constitution which may or may not be appointed by the President. For example, under Article 340, if you take a look at Article 340, there is something called Backward Classes Commission. For example, the Mandal Commission was formed under this article. Take a look at Article 340, there is something called the Backward Classes Commission, which is an example of a Yeah, this is something, Braja, I've been taking a look at it myself. Only this morning I was taking a look at the newspaper about a Calcutta High Court judge uh, declaring very serious problems with regard to the panchayat elections that is happening in West Bengal. Yeah, this is something that we can take a look at today. Actually, this is a very interesting point that Braja is making, and I will try to, in a way, give you some aspects of what are the powers which are given to the High Court vis-a-vis the election commissioners, specifically in matters related to the organizing of elections, etc. Now, this is of course the state election commissioner, not the union election commissioner, because it is a panchayat elections. So this is a good thing that I can, the parts that we're discussing today will give you a certain clarity of how these questions can be in somewhere dealt with. Okay. However, I'll have to say that panchayat elections, though are an election, they do not form under the jurisdiction of the union government. They are a state subject. So most of the panchayat elections are organized, and everything that has to be happened around a panchayat election is to be decided by the state government. So RPA 1951 does not necessarily cover the entirety of panchayat elections, but nonetheless you'll get an idea of how these things can be taken up. Okay. Now, what I'm saying is that Article 340 has a backward classes commission, which is a what you can call a backward classes commission, but it is not a permanent commission. It is not a constitutional body, because the president may or may not appoint the backward classes commission. But when it comes to, for example, let's say the constitution was amended to introduce Article 338B. Constitution was amended to introduce Article 338B, which became the replacement for the backward classes commission as a permanent backward classes commission, which is the National Commission for Backward Classes. And this body is a constitutional body, which means that it shall be, constituted, and that is, there is no way that the president cannot constitute a body like this. So this is the difference between a constitutional body and a non-constitutional body. Even if a body is mentioned in the constitution, doesn't make it a constitutional body unless there's a term shall which is applied to it in terms of its necessary composition or constitution. Okay, now take a look at this. The Article 324 makes the Election Commission of India. Article 324 makes the Election Commission of India. And what we are basically looking at is one point, is basically, let me first introduce to you the question or the concept of plenary powers. Plenary powers of the Election Commission of India. Let me just introduce to you this as a concept, plenary powers. Okay. Now, when we take a look at the question of, let's say, I can, in a way, exemplify the powers of Election Commission more clearly if I make a comparison between Election Commission of India and the CAG. Okay. If I make a comparison between the Election Commission of India and the CAG, I can give you a better understanding of our, how the Election Commission of India is empowered, right? Now, CAG, for example, number one, is a constitutional body. And similarly, the Election Commission of India is also a constitutional body. This is similar with each other, right? Second, CAG comes into action by a law made by Parliament or state legislature. What I mean to say is that CAG has the what you can call the power to exercise auditing over the accounts of India, all the accounts of India, all the money which is coming and going inside the consolidated fund of India and the consolidated fund of the states is supposed to be the subject matter of the CAG. Let me repeat, all the money which is coming and going in the consolidated fund of India and the consolidated fund of the states is a subject matter of the CAG. So the CAG can exercise audit upon this money. But the CAG cannot exercise audit upon this money unless such powers are given to CAG by a enactment. Okay. Let's say, for example, the government has, let's say, introduced a cess, let's say GST compensation cess. The government has introduced. Now, this cess has been introduced as a part of the GST Compensation Cess Act. This is an enactment which has been passed by the Parliament. Within this enactment, there will be a provision. Within the GST Compensation Cess Act enactment, there will be a provision which states that the accounts of all the GST compensation cess will be audited by the CAG. If there is a position like this in this act, then there is going to be the power which has been given to the CAG. Meaning the CAG has what you can call extraordinary powers with regard to accounts and auditing of the government of India and the government of states. But the government of India and the government of states have to enable the CAG in a law to exercise such powers. Unless the CAG is enabled by a law, the CAG cannot be allowed to exercise these powers. Okay, that is one thing. With regard to the Election Commission of India, if you take a look at Article 324, no such thing has been given. You see, the point is this. With regard to Election Commission of India, ECI, no such power, like no such provision that the Parliament will make laws to enable the ECI are given. Okay, there is no such thing as given, meaning it doesn't say anything. Okay, all that Article 324 clause 1 states is that the superintendent's direction and control of elections. Okay, let me just briefly outline that out for you. Article 324 clause 1 states that the superintendent's direction and control. Article 324 clause 1 states that the superintendent's direction and control of these two things, which is preparing the electoral rolls and organizing the elections, conducting elections. To these 6 elections. Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, President, Vice President, Vidhan Sabha and Vidhan Parishad. Okay, I've just broken down Article 324 for you in a kind of flowchart format. Article 324 clause 1 states that the superintendent's direction and control in terms of preparing the electoral rolls and conducting the elections to Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, President, Vice President, Vidhan Sabha and Vidhan Parishad shall be the domain of the Election Commission of India. That's all that it says. It gives the power of the superintendent's direction and control to the Election Commission of India in these regards. Can we take an understanding of this? Superintendent's direction and control of in terms of preparing the electoral rolls and conducting elections to the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, President, Vice President, Vidhan Sabha and Vidhan Parishad shall be with the Election Commission of India, right? Okay, so the person who is the Election Commission of India doesn't have any provisions like the CAG in which it is written that they have to be empowered by a law which are given. Okay, now third point, let's take a look at in comparing the CAG and the Election Commission of India. It's a very frequent question which is asked by the UPSC with regard to the comparison of the two important constitutional bodies. Okay, point number 3 we can write over here in CAG is the what you can call CAG has been given a staff under it. Okay, it is the Indian Audit and Accounts Department or Indian Audit and Accounts Services, right? What I mean to say is that CAG has been given a permanent staff with it. CAG has been given a permanent staff with it. Indian Audit and Accounts Department. Clear? On the other hand, Election Commission of India does not have any permanent staff. Election Commission of India does not have any permanent staff. Okay, let me elaborate for you what it means to have a staff. Article 324 clause 6. Article 324 clause 6 of the Constitution states that the Election Commission of India can write a letter to the President or the Governor just before the elections. Write a letter to the President and the Governor just before the elections. To make for its service all the staff that can be made available. Okay, that all the staff which is under the President of India, which is the Government of India, and the Governor of a particular state. So all the government staff which is available, or whichever government staff the Election Commission of India wants during the time of elections, the President can and the Governor can allot this staff to work for the Election Commission of India, right? So you must have noticed, for example, you have the Indian Audits and Accounts Department, Indian Audits and Accounts Services through the UPSC. You have an entry for this post and you become parts of the CAG office. But you have never heard about recruitment to the Election Commission of India. You have never seen a person who's working at the Election Commission of India as an officer or a bureaucrat or something like that, right? You don't have a permanent dedicated staff. Which is, in a way, moving towards working only dedicatedly for the Election Commission of India. Instead, what you have seen is that the school teachers and, you have seen bank officers, etc., of nationalized banks or any other Government of India officer working for the Election Commission of India in terms of managing the booths, etc., by the order of the Election Commissioner. So that's basically what has been given under Article 324 Clause 6. Okay. Now, I'm just trying to highlight the relevance of Election Commission of India as a constitutional body in comparison to the CAG. And the CAG has certain questions and areas about the Election Commission of India, and these need to be taken care of in particular terms, right? Now, what do we understand? When we talk about, let's say for example, Election Commission of India, let's say you can divide the story of Election Commission of India in two halves, right? Pre 1990 and post 1990. Election Commission of India actually started becoming very relevant and powerful only after 1990s. Now, previous to the 1990 year, all the election commissioners in India were not able to regulate the conduct of elections in India. They were not very, successful in ensuring that elections can be conducted freely and fairly. Booth capturing was a very rampant phenomenon, right? The rigging of elections by many means, intimidating of voters, intimidating of the people who are manning the booth, etc., were all completely under the control of the local politicians, and the Election Commission could not do too much to, let's say, get a kind of a power in terms of stopping these acts before 1990s. For example, let's say Election Commissions of India at the time said there are two major problems with this. Okay, one problem is that whenever, for example, Election Commission of India goes and tells, let's say, take an example like this. Let's say this is a simple state legislative assembly. Okay, let's say this is the state of Madhya Pradesh. State Legislative Assembly of Madhya Pradesh elections are going on. Okay. Now, the question is that Election Commission of India is going to regulate these elections, is going to oversee these elections, superintend, direct and control these elections. Okay. But the powers of the Election Commission of India, powers of ECI, were not clearly defined. Powers of ECI were not clearly defined. Please pay attention to what I'm trying to say. We are stating that the Election Commission of India was to regulate the elections at the state legislative assembly level. But the powers were not clearly defined because there was no law which was giving the powers to the Election Commission of India as to what it can do. Can the Election Commission try this offence? Let's say, for example, there's a problem simply at some election space that one person has broken a glass bottle on the head of another person during elections. Now, the question was always that does this kind of a thing, that if a person breaks the glass bottle on the head of another person during elections, it has to go to the Election Commission of India for settlement. This thing was not specified in any law made by the Parliament, right? So, the Election Commission of India always felt, now let's say when the Election Commission of India goes and looks at this incident which happened during elections, that a person has broken a glass bottle on the head of another person, Election Commission would want to take, charge of this activity and decide upon this matter. But then again, there would be the police who would say that it is not your matter, it is our matter. It is not an election matter, it is a law and order matter. Therefore, we are supposed to take in charge of that. So, what used to happen was that other agencies of the government which had legal backing of taking control or taking power on certain areas would take the matters away from the Election Commission of India. And usually these organizations and these agencies were controlled by the state government or the union government. What I mean to say is by the state political party or the union political party. Right. So, for example, the police of a particular state says that this kind of a thing has happened, it is our jurisdiction to try this and you don't get into this. Now, let's say the police in that state is under the political influence of that state concerned, which will, let's say, if the person from their political party has done something wrong as an electoral malpractice during elections, and if the police is taking in charge of that matter, that person can be let off easily. And his, let's say for example, impact on the elections will not be felt. Meaning that the person who has done booth rigging or gundagardi at election levels, etc. If police is going to be in charge of this activity, then the government of the state can control the police and also be a little easier on these people who are conducting or committing corrupt practices inside the election space. And every time Election Commission of India would reach there, it would be told that you don't have the power under any law to do it. All that you have is the Constitution of India, which is superintendence, direction and control, but we don't know what that means. So where does it say in law that you have the power to try this, that a person has broken the bottle on another person's head? Okay, where do you have the legislative or the judicial or the executive power to have a kind of a say upon these matters? So to this, the Election Commission of India could not have a response, because there were no explicit laws which gave the Election Commission of India to try offences like these. You see the point? So the Commission of India was always backed off by the governments of the state and of the union, and all the other agencies used to take control of the election matters, or the matters which had crime which happened in elections, badtamizi, misbehavior which happened in elections, all the things which are supposed to be of a nature in which you can manipulate the results of elections used to happen, and all these cases went to the police or to some other organization or some other agency, but not to the Election Commission of India. And therefore the Election Commission of India was asked to back off by all the agencies, saying that you don't have any legal empowerment to take care of this particular case. You see the point? That's one thing. Second thing that added to the problems of Election Commission of India was the lack of permanent staff. Okay, so let's say, for example, if the Election Commission of India wanted to conduct elections again, let's say in Madhya Pradesh State Legislative Assembly. To conduct this election, they will have to take the permission of the governor to have, let's say, for example, there is a city called Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh, and if Bhopal is going for votes, then the Election Commission of India would contact the district collector of Bhopal and say that you have to work for the Election Commission of India during this period. Okay, and you will make sure that there are free and fair elections in Bhopal. So everything, you have to organize a space for voting, you have to organize a way to conduct electoral rolls, and we'll issue guidelines, etc., etc. So Election Commission, like a central agency, and the district collector, like a regional agency, would communicate with each other and let the district collector do its job. That's what's given under Article 324 Clause 6, because Election Commission of India does not have a permanent staff with itself. Now it happened to be the case very often that the district collector, who is sitting very much away from the Election Commission of India, which is sitting in New Delhi, and also the Election Commission of India doesn't have too much of a staff of its own, right? So not all the people can come to all the centers where elections are happening, so they have to rely upon what these people do in confidence. District collector, let's say, for example, if he is under the influence of the CM of Bhopal, who is again fighting elections to get back in power, then the district collector can, in a way, sabotage the way in which he is receiving instructions from the Election Commission of India and incline the activities of elections towards the Chief Minister of Bhopal. You see, this was a disadvantage of not having a permanent staff, or because whatever staff you are taking from the governor or the president may eventually work for the inclination of the political party which is at the center or at the state. You see the point? So that's why these two points made the working of Election Commission rather inefficient. Now the conditions began to become bad for Election Commission of India, as a response to which the Election Commission of India said that there are reforms which are needed in the Election Commission. The constitution must be amended to reform the structure of the Election Commission of India, and it said that the ECI, number one, must be given powers specifically by law, but the law has to tell exactly what are the powers given to ECI, so that the other agencies and other organizations in the government do not usurp upon the part of the ECI, right? So what they said was that we have to make specific powers by making laws which govern the ECI. And second, what the Election Commission of India said was about a permanent staff, that they want a permanent staff. So they wanted a kind of a body which was on the lines of the CAG. They wanted a CAG-like body which had specific laws under they had exclusive jurisdiction, and the permanent staff, so that they could not rely upon the staff which is like, Indian Audit and Account Services on the lines of that, you had to cover the Election Commission of India services. These were recommendations given by the Election Commission of India to the governments routinely to reform the structural Election Commission of India and to manage the elections freely and fairly. Otherwise, the Election Commission was not able to handle things in terms of letting the transparency and what you can call viability of elections be foolproof, right? So this was one part in which we were taking a look at this. The government did not make any reforms, and then there came an election commission of the most magnificent order, T.N. Session. T.N. Session became the Election Commissioner of India. Okay. When T.N. Session became the Election Commissioner of India, he read Article 324 in a very different light. Article 324, 1 and 6 he read very differently. Okay. In Article 324 clause 1 and 324 clause 6, where other election commissioners had seen a liability, he saw an opportunity. He inferred that under Article 324 clause 1, there is no need for a law to make or empower the parliament. Okay. What he empower the election commission? He said that any matter which is related to elections in India has to be covered by the election commission. Any matter related to the elections in India has to be covered by election commission, right? Again, I'll repeat. Any matter related to elections in India has to be covered by elections commissions, unless a law is made to cover that matter by some other agency. The argument that T.N. Session made put this entire thing upright. He said that this argument is standing on its head, right? He stood it back upon its feet as to realize the intention of Article 324. He started saying that we don't need laws to empower us to do certain activities. Anything in the territory of India with regard to elections, to the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Vidhan Sabha, Vidhan Parishad President and Vice President is supposed to come to the Election Commission of India. It is a black hole in which all matters related to elections will be channelized, unless any matter related to elections has been given to some other authority. Okay, so the argument previously was that you have to specify the roles that Elections Commission of India will have, the powers that Election Commission of India will have. What T.N. Session said was that you have to specify what it will not have, and unless you have specified it, there will be a very simple rule that everything related to elections, like for example, if a person beats another person, let's say if this person tries to beat this person in a regular time, okay, then this matter will go to the police. But if this person tries to beat this person under a electoral activity or electoral space, or where elections are being conducted or campaigning is happening or something like that, then this matter, by the reading of Article 324 clause 1, will not be referred to the police, it will be referred to the Election Commission of India, or at least be referred to the police in terms of the crimes that they have committed, but also will be referred to Election Commission of India in terms of deciding whether these people can be barred from participating in the electoral space. You see the point? So T.N. Session, the genius of T.N. Session, the most magnificent civil servant India has produced, was to very clearly understand that you can easily put this argument upon its feet. It was standing on its head. The Constitution was correct in not giving a legal framework or a dedicated services to the Election Commission of India. By that reason, everything which is not made by law to be given to some other agency, let's say for example, Article 80 says that all matters with regard to elections must be tried at the High Court. If this section was not written in RPA, then all matters with regard to elections would have automatically come to the Election Commission of India. You see, it's like a black hole. It's like a mass which has the most amount of gravity, and it can easily pull all the matters of elections in India to itself, unless these matters are explicitly left out for other agencies or other organizations to carry out. You see, this is what T.N. Session discovered, and he changed the nature in which the Election Commission of India worked, right? And this, for example, is the meaning of the term plenary powers. Plenary powers of Election Commission of India. What it means to say is that Election Commission of India shall have all those powers with regard to elections in India, with regard to elections which are not already, or which are not specifically given to, other agencies, by a law. So now the point is not that the Parliament has to empower the Election Commission of India. If the Parliament has not made a law giving that subject matter to anyone else, then the powers will come to the Election Commission of India. And the simple idea is that all powers with relation to the elections in India will eventually come back to Election Commission of India. Okay, you see the point? This is what is known in the context of Election Commission of India as plenary powers, right? This was first about what is known as law. That Election Commission of India doesn't need a legal empowerment. It can do with what you call the Constitution of India under Article 324, which is higher than any law that the Parliament can ever make. This is what the Election Commission of India stated. Okay. Second point, Election Commission of India said that we do not need a permanent staff. Okay. It said that, let's say for example, if this is a person working for the government of a state, Election Commission of India under Article 324 clause 6 can exercise complete powers upon this person. And now what the Election Commission of India started doing was, it started taking these powers seriously. That they said that we do not need a permanent dedicated staff under the Election Commission of India. All the government services in India are a staff under the Election Commission of India during the period of elections. And the TN session administration in this regard started taking these powers very seriously. TN session started making a very clear, what you can call, attestation to the fact that the ECI will not let people who are not following the orders of Election Commission of India at the state services or at the central services continue in duty if they are found to be in a contempt of the order of the ECI. So, for example, generally speaking, the President of India, who has appointed a particular person at the level of the government of India, is the one who is supposed to remove him. But during the time of elections under Article 324 clause 6, the Election Commission of India can exercise the same powers as the President of India to remove him from his post. Okay, that's why, for example, you see every time there is elections in a certain area, be it the Lok Sabha or the Vidhan Sabha elections, the entire public administration in districts, in constituencies, leaves everything else and tries to focus upon elections, because they know that the Election Commission of India has the power that if we do not do it according to the conditions of the Election Commission of India, the Election Commission of India can take us to a task, to the point that it can terminate our services and also hold criminal proceedings against us. You see the point? Am I able to make the point here clearly? The Election Commission of India, TN session said, does not need a permanent staff. All the government servants of India are a permanent staff of the Election Commission of India, and insofar as there are elections happening in a particular area, those government servants will not report to their, public administration in charge, but they will report to the Election Commission of India. And he started taking this kind of an action very seriously. He said that if you do not, let's say for example, if a district collector says that we are not following the rules properly, correctly, TN session would just under his letterhead suspend that district collector and say that we have found that under Article 324 clause 6 you have been given certain obligations to follow by the Election Commission of India, and if you do not follow them, you will be let out of your services, and to the point that you can be criminally prosecuted for coming in the way of free and fair elections in India. Now, this is where TN Sessions started tightening the arrest upon the public servants who were hitherto lackadaisical in terms of dealing with the election processes, the government servants, etc., etc. And he started firing them, suspending them, terminating them, and putting them behind jail left, right, and center, which made the Election Commission realize the hidden powers that were given to it under Article 324, Clause 1 and Clause 6. That they said that you don't need a law to be made to empower you. The Constitution already empowers it, right? You don't need to put a medal on the Mount Everest. You don't need the Parliament to agree that these powers are to be given to the Election Commission of India. The Election Commission of India can directly take these powers and do that kind of a thing. You see the point? That's where the Election Commission of India rose as one of the most powerful constitutional bodies, the most powerful constitutional body in the Republic of India, right, under the Constitution of India. This is what I'm trying to state in terms of what is known as the plenary powers. Okay, so here we have taken a look at briefly Article 324, Clause 1 and Clause 6. Right, we can easily make a simple heading out of this, which I will give you a notes upon, which are known as plenary powers. Article 324 Clause 1 and Article 324 Clause 6. Okay, superintendent's direction and control and the staff with the Election Commission of India. Since then, there have been no recommendations of, making a new staff come into the Election Commission of India, etc., etc. All that it is saying is that there must be superintendent's direction and control of elections, and the Election Commission can do anything with regard to doing that unless the Parliament provides otherwise, right? So that is why the Election Commission of India is even more independent in terms of its activities than the CAG, because the CAG has to wait for the Parliament to give it the permission. Election Commission of India does not have to wait for the Parliament to give its permission, unless the Parliament is actually taking away the powers from the Election Commission of India. Okay, this matter also was like after the Election Commission of India under TN Session started, exercising these kind of activities. The matter also went to the Supreme Court of India. After TN Session started, conducting all these activities, the matter also went to the Supreme Court of India, and Supreme Court agreed with this interpretation, and it put a stamp on the plenary powers, stating that the Election Commission of India has absolute powers and plenary powers in terms of conducting elections, and therefore these powers cannot be overridden, or these powers cannot be questioned or not followed by the people who are empowered under Article 324 Clause 6. Right, and by this TN Session got a thappa of the Election Commission of India also in terms of doing these kind of activities, right? And that is where Election Commission became one of the most powerful, independent and autonomous bodies in the country, right, after the administration of TN Session. So that is the first part that I want to cover in Election Commission, which is the concept of plenary powers. Okay. Second, what do I want to cover in Election Commission after plenary powers is the question of appointments of the Election Commission. Now, since we have seen that in fact, let me just very briefly say it about the composition and appointment. Very briefly, I'll just give you some insight upon what is this composition and appointment of Election Commission of India. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at this. Point number 1. The Constitution says that the ECI must have at least one member. who will be the election commissioner. Necessarily must have the one member who will be the election commissioner. But the parliament the ECI says that the constitution that there must be one member who shall be the election commissioner, but the parliament can expand the membership of ECI. Sorry, not the parliament, my bad, the president. But the president can expand the members of the ECI. You see the point? So the necessary requirement given by the constitution, we're reading article 324 clause 2. Article 324 clause 2, we are reading this. It states that the ECI must have necessarily one member, but the president can expand the membership of ECI. Okay, and under this category, initially the Election Commission of India had only one person, but now today, currently, Election Commission of India is a three-membered body. Okay, is a three-membered body. Currently, Election Commission of India is a three-membered body which has Chief Election Commissioner, and then two election commissioners. Okay, this is the current what you can call the composition of the election commission. You have the chief election commissioner, and then you have the election commissioner number 1 and election commissioner number 2. Clear? This is a three-membered body currently which is working as the Election Commission of India, right? The chief election commissioner, CEC, is sometimes also simply known as the CEC, and the election commissioners are known as the ECs. Okay, so this is the point that is given under Article 324 clause 2, composition wise. Right. Next point about composition is next point about this is going to be appointment. How are the election commissions, or how are these three members appointed? Now this is a matter of a lot of debate, and this is where I'm going to take a look at a Supreme Court judgment which has been given recently in terms of the appointment of the Election Commission of India. The Supreme Court has made a very clear categorical observations with regard to this. Okay, take a look at this. Appointment. The Article 324 clause 2 says that the election commissioners and the CEC, Chief Election Commissioners, subject to a law must be appointed by the President. Okay, so what I mean to say is that the election commission plus the chief election commissions in India, chief election commissioners in India, subject to a law, must be appointed by the president, which means that the power has been given by the constitution to the parliament to make a law for the regulation of the appointment of the election commission of India. And subject to that law, but under the provisions of that law, the president can finalize the appointment of the election commissioners. This is what Article 324 Clause 2 says about the appointment of the election commission plus the chief election commissioners. Right? A law which is to be made by the parliament, by which the president can finalize the appointment procedure. Clear? Now, what is the position? Current position. The current position on the matter is that the parliament, current position on the matter is that the parliament has not yet made a law. And the current position is that the parliament has not yet made a law, and the president, which in reality actually means that the Prime Minister of India, it is really the call of the Prime Minister. The President, the Prime Minister, appoints the election commissioners. This is the current position. Please take a look at it properly. Try to understand what I'm trying to say over here. Take a look at this chart clearly with regard to the appointment of election commissioners. It says that Article 324 Clause 2 states that the appointment of election commissioners plus the chief election commissioner shall be subject to a law, which means that law must be made to regulate the appointment, and then the appointment must be finalized by the president. Matlab, the parliament and the president together must work in some kind of a, a kind of a checks and balances system to regulate the appointment of the Election Commission of India. But the current reality is that the parliament has not yet made a law, and the president, which means the prime minister, appoints both the chief election commissioners and the election commissioners. You see the point? Now, just think about this properly, that in the last part which we were reading about, we had seen that the election commissioner of India has plenary powers, has extraordinary powers with regard to elections. It has powers in which it can trump the powers of any other state organization, state government, central government, and also it can take control of the staff of the government of India and the government of states completely under itself in exercising these powers. You see the point? So the question is, if, let's say for example, these powers are given to a person, you have 3 members who will exercise this power in the entire country of India: the chief election commissioner and 2 election commissions, which is the current composition of the election commission. Now, if these 3 members are going to be appointed by the ruling party at the union government, which itself is also a political player in the elections, then there is a possibility that these election commissioners could be the ones who are chosen by the ruling party to have some kind of a support in their own categories. Meaning, what you are possibly likely to see is that the independence and autonomy of the election commissioners can be compromised if they are being handpicked by a ruling party. Let's say for example, if I am a senior bureaucrat and I am being chosen as becoming this chief election commissioner, and if I have an allegiance or adherence to the political party internally in some way or the other, or they can influence me or manipulate me, or I want to be in their good books, etc., etc., or I believe in their ideology, political ideology, which is worse, I, as an election commission of India, as the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners of India, can take certain decisions in which I may impose strict actions against other political parties, but not so strict actions against the political party which has appointed me to this power. Okay, I can in a way impose or project my own views and my own political opinions when I'm grabbing the seat of the Election Commission of India, which is obviously a breach of the independence and autonomy of an organization. Right? You see the point? So therefore, all of this appointment thing was a matter of huge discussion before the Supreme Court. Okay, in 2015, a PIL was filed. It's a judicial review of appointment of ECI by President. This is the point at which we are arriving today, where we are looking at the history of all of these things together. A judicial review of appointment of ECI by the President. That's the question that we're trying to ask. Okay, so what is the first part that we can take a look at? Number one, there was a case which was filed in 2015 as a PIL before the Supreme Court, which said that the appointment of the election commissions or the Chief Election Commissioner and the election commissioners, if it is left in the hands of the Prime Minister of India, will clearly incline the elections in the favor of the political party from which the Prime Minister is coming. Right? This PIL was filed before the Supreme Court. In 2018, Supreme Court referred this PIL to a 5-judge bench. You know what a 5-judge bench is? It is one of the simplest of constitution benches. Okay, it is a constitution bench, the 5-judge bench, right? And in 2023, the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court gave a judgment on this matter. Okay, the judgment which was given by the 5-judge bench had this particular point. Okay, so we can call this case the ECI 2023 case, Election Commission of India 2023 case, as it is known by the Supreme Court. Okay, and I'll give you a free understanding about the ECI 2023 case. Okay, some observations made by the Supreme Court and some changes made by the Supreme Court in terms of the appointment of the election commissioners. Okay, first observations made by the Supreme Court was this, that there was what you call a legislative deficit. This was the first observation made by the Supreme Court. What it said was that Article 324 Clause 2 empowers the Parliament to make a law to regulate the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioners and the Election Commissioners. Since the Parliament has not made this law, even after 75 years of the imposition of the Indian freedom and 73 years of the Indian Constitution, the Parliament has not made such a law. So therefore, there has been a lapse, or there has been a kind of a what you can call drop of the responsibility of the Parliament. And of course, why would Parliament make law to control election commissions? Because Parliament itself is a seat of the government, and the government would not want to regulate the appointment of the election commission or give any person outside the Parliament or the government the power to appoint the election commission, because that would, in a way, be politically expensive for them, that they will not be able to influence the election commission at all. Okay, so the court said that there was a legislative deficit, that the legislature has not done its job as it was prescribed by the Constitution of India under Article 324 Clause 2. Right? That's the point that we are taking a look at. First, the Supreme Court said. Second, the Supreme Court said that the judiciary can balance this deficit. said judiciary can balance this deficit, which means to say that if the legislature is not making a law, judiciary, under the concept of checks and balances. See, what are checks and balances? Take a look at this. In India, you have a separation of powers, right? In India, you have a separation of powers. For example, let's say this is the legislative and this is the judiciary and this is the executive. Now there is a separation of powers. But let's say, for example, the model that India has of separation of powers is not that of a strict separation of powers, but of checks and balances. What does it mean, checks and balances? Let's say if the legislature is, let's say, doing certain things which are not correct legislatively, okay, let's say the legislature is doing certain things which are unconstitutional, is making a law which is unconstitutional. So the judiciary can check this law and counter this law. Check means that you're checking someone from doing something. Don't do it. You're not allowed to make a law like this. That is where judiciary can, in a way, involve itself into a law-making exercise by telling the legislature not to make a law like this, right? And what is balance? Balance is this. Let's say, for example, if there is a certain area upon which a law has to be made but is not being made by the legislature. Let's say, for example, this is an area where a law is supposed to be made but the legislature is not making a law upon this. Judiciary can step inside this area and make a law till the time the legislature actually makes a law. Judiciary can step inside this area and make a law till the time legislature has made a law upon it itself. This is what is known as the act of balance. Checks and balances meaning balance. You're balancing something. Let's say, for example, you have two, pillars to a building. If one pillar is falling down a little bit, then the other pillar can lend support to its domain. This is how you balance a particular thing, right? So the system of separation of powers in India is known as a system of checks and balances, which allow a organ of the state to check the excessive activities of the other organ of the state and to balance the deficits of the other organ of the state. That's the kind of separation of powers that India follows. And by this understanding, the judiciary says that till the time there is a law made by Parliament under Article 324 Clause 2 to regulate the appointment of Election Commission of India, the Supreme Court is empowered to make this kind of a provision. And under this provision, the Supreme Court said that the appointment of the Election Commission of India, with it, the Chief Election Commissioners and the Election Commissioners, shall be done by a committee. Supreme Court formed this committee, right? Shall be done by a committee which will include 3 members: the Prime Minister of India, which will include 3 members: the Prime Minister of India, the Leader of Opposition, and if there is no opposition, the Leader of the second largest party in the Lok Sabha. There can be no opposition. 10% requirement is there for becoming an opposition. If there is no opposition, the second largest party of Lok Sabha, and the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, and after that you have the Chief Justice of India. These are the 3-membered committee which is supposed to decide upon who will become the Election Commissioner of India. You see the point? It's a 3-membered committee which will decide who will become the Election Commissioner of India: the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India. And this, the judiciary has decided in the Election Commission of India case 2023, which is obviously one of the most significant current developments in regard to the Election Commission of India in the last year. in this year exactly. So the election commission, who's not now going to be appointed before the 2024 elections, is not going to be chosen only by the prime minister, but by a committee composed of this. The parliament cannot, the prime minister cannot disagree to this particular fact, right? And the Supreme Court has said that this committee this committee will be in force till a law is made by the parliament. The parliament can obviously exercise its legislative powers to make a, you know, a regulation, whatever it thinks is a regulating way of is a way of regulating the election of the appointment of the election commissioner. But till this law is made by the parliament, this committee will be in force in terms of impacting, in terms of what you can call, in appointing the election commissioners to the election commission of India. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Right, I hope that I'm making the point about here clearly. It's a very strong and important judgment. It's a very huge judgment, and I've tried to just distill the essence of this judgment and give it to you. Question number 1 is, what is the current position by which the election commissioners are appointed in India? And the current position is that you have this particular way. Appointment of election commission happens through Article 324, Clause 2. Election commissioner and chief election commissioner are subject to law made by the parliament, must be appointed by the president. Current position is that parliament has not yet made a law, and the president, prime minister, appoints the CEC plus EC. Right? This was subjected to judicial review by certain PILs, saying that the appointment of the election commission at the hands of the prime minister can compromise his independence and autonomy. And therefore, in 2015, a PIL was filed before the Supreme Court. 2018, the Supreme Court referred this PIL to a larger bench, and in 2023, this larger bench gave the judgment known as the ECI 2023 case. And in the ECI 2023 case, Supreme Court made the following observations. Number 1, that there was a legislative deficit, that the law has not been made by the parliament with regard to the appointment of the election commissioners. Number 2, law under Article 324, Clause 2, unless it is made, the judiciary can balance this deficit, and the separation of powers model of Indian constitution, which is that of a checks and balances model, not a strict separation of powers, can be justified for the judiciary to make a legislation kind of an activity in which it formed a committee which composes the prime minister, the leader of opposition, and the CJI, the 3-membered committee, and this committee will be in force to appoint the EC and CEC till a law is made by the parliament, which means for the 2024 elections, the election commissioner of India cannot be chosen only by the union party, right? That's the point that we're trying to take a look at in this sense. Clear? Just take a look at it and let me know if you have any questions. I can take it up now. Okay. Now, the third observation made by the Supreme Court in this particular thing was just a mere observation but not a point. Okay. See, Article 324 talks about the appointment of the Election Commission of India, which includes the Chief Election Commissioner plus the election commissioners, right? This is the composition. It's a 3-membered body. But it also talks about the removal of the Election Commission of India, of the CEC plus EC. Okay. Now, it generally happens to be the case that if, let's say, a person has been appointed as the Chief Election Commissioner, he may present to himself, he may present to the government that he is, going to work by the activities of the government, etc., etc. And, let's say, for example, if I am a civil servant, I'm a senior IAS officer, and if I am, presenting myself as a person to the government of India, that I am a person who is not a rebel. I am not a person who will do a lot of activity of political interference with the government, or I will let the government decide and I will just follow the decisions more or less. If I am that kind of a person, or let's say if I am projecting myself to be that kind of a person to the government, and the government makes me the Election Commission of India, makes me the Chief Election Commissioner or the Election Commissioner, if that kind of a thing happens, then please pay attention to this. Once I have gotten the post of the Chief Election Commissioner, I can actually reveal my true intentions. Let's say I am a bureaucrat who is working very steadily and patiently to achieve a position like the Chief Election Commissioner, and I am not taking unnecessary battles with the government, battles with the political parties in this meantime, and I am presenting a face of competence and of obedience to the political parties, or to the political masters, or to the ministers, or to the governments. Okay. Now, let's say if they make me the Chief Election Commissioner of India, once I have been made the Chief Election Commissioner of India, now I can start exposing the political parties in terms of elections. So, no matter what allegiance I may have to one political party, I can expose that political party, or I can take actions against that political party, or I can, be transparent in my decision making about that political party after I become the Chief Election Commissioner of India, because I can be appointed by a political party, but I can't be removed by that political party. Once I have been appointed, once they realize that they have appointed a person, now, but this person is turning out to be a real smarty. He's trying to become he's now taking his job very seriously, and he's holding elections very properly and all of that, and he's not listening to us. If the political party does not like that person, they cannot merely remove him. This is the same for Election Commission in terms of the CEC and for the CAG and for the Finance Commission to some extent. You see the point? So, the idea is that an ideal bureaucrat is one who's looking to get to these positions quietly and simply and patiently without taking a lot of rebellion against the government. Okay. But once he has gotten a position like this, the Constitution has ensured that if you want to, for example, remove the CEC, you can appoint the CEC, the President can appoint the CEC, but if you want to remove the CEC, you have to go through the same procedure as for a removal of a judge of the High Court. You have to go through the same procedure as the removal of the judge of the High Court, of a judge of the High Court. Okay, and when the judge of the High Court has been, judge of the Supreme Court, judge of the Supreme Court, right? So, Article 124 plus the Judges Inquiry Act, (1968) gives the procedure and the power to the Parliament to remove a Supreme Court judge, and therefore a Chief Election Commissioner can, to one extent, appointed by the President, but he cannot be removed by the President. He cannot work at the pleasure of the President. For example, the Attorney General works at the pleasure of the President. The Governor of a state works at the pleasure of the President. He can be removed anytime he displeases the president. Displeases the president means that the president just does not like him. There is no other reason at all. Okay, so the Chief Election Commissioner cannot be removed by the pleasure of the president. He can only be removed by a very sophisticated procedure which is to be followed, identical to the procedure to remove the judge of a Supreme Court. Okay, so this is the part about the Chief Election Commissioner. But the election commissioners are not given this security. Okay, the election commissioners can be removed by the president. The additional 2 election commissioners apart from the chief electioners can be removed by the president. And therefore, the Supreme Court made this kind of an observation. The Supreme Court said that even the ECs must be given security. The ECs must be given security in terms of the election commission. EC must be given security identical to that of the chief election commissioner. Okay, and this kind of a security, once it is attained by the chief election commissioner and the EC, will make the election commission a truly independent autonomous body which can conduct with all its plenary powers the free and fair conduct of elections to the Vidhan Sabha, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Vidhan Parishad, President and Vice President, the superintendence, direction and control. This is what just an observation made by the Supreme Court, that this kind of a thing must also in future be given to the election commission so that they can be completely politically independent. You see the point? So this is all that we are taking a look at in terms of election commission, article 324, all that I can tell you, and what are the current updates upon this, right? If you understand these 2 parts, the 2 parts basically we are discussing is, one is with ECI, we are just reading it into 2 parts. One is plenary powers. With ECI, we are dealing it in 2 parts. One is plenary powers and the second is appointments. Okay, plenary powers and appointments. With regard to plenary powers, I have given you the article number 324 clause 1 and clause 6, which are general powers of the ECI and the staff of the ECI. And under appointments, I have given you article 324 clause 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Okay, these are the clauses that you can read, which are basically including the appointment of the election commission or the way that appointments are done along with the composition, and B, the removal. If you can think of this structure very simply, you can answer any question which comes from the Election Commission of India, including the judgment of the Supreme Court in the ECI 2023 case. Please remember the reasoning given by the Supreme Court, the reasoning of what you can call a ability to, let's say, balance legislative deficit. This is a question that can come directly in the main examination, because the Supreme Court has used this phrase to empower itself to make a law which is not made by the Parliament. Okay, so balancing a legislative deficit by the judiciary is an example of the separation of powers model followed by India, which is that of a checks and balances system. Okay, I hope this becomes clear to you. Right? So this is about the Election Commission of India. Okay. Let me just go to the Constitution of India and quickly take a look at the remaining articles with regard to the elections. Article 324 onwards. Okay, you can take a look at Article 324 Clause 1 yourself by the explanations that I have given to you, please. The charts that you have drawn about Article 324 Clause 1, please take a look at that, this statement with reference to that chart. 324 Clause 1. Take a look at this, please. The superintendence, direction and control of the preparation of the electoral rolls and of the conduct of all elections to Parliament and to the legislature of every state and of elections to the offices of President and Vice President held under this Constitution shall be vested in a commission referred to in this Constitution as the Election Commission. Okay. Article 324 Clause 1. Look at the chart that you have drawn and see how that chart is just a breakdown, simplified version of what is written under Article 324 Clause 1. Okay. Take a look at Article 324 Clause 2 with regard to the appointment of election commissions. Please read it and look at the chart that you have drawn on your notes about that. Okay. And then just take a look at Article this one. Just take a look at this one. This part. 324 Clause 5. The removal of you can take a look at this part in terms of the other election commissioners, ECs. Right. And then in continuation to that, please read Article 324 Clause 6. By this, all the clauses of Article 324 you can have a clear understanding of. If you can develop an ability to read the Bare Act directly, it would be of immense help in terms of answering questions directly from the Constitution, because at this point of time, many standard books which are referred to with relation to Constitution are not very effective in getting marks. Okay, I hope this is clear. Okay, then just take very simply take a look at Article 325 and 326. Article 325. Now, see, I'm just very quickly giving you a kind of a running summary of all the articles and sections related to elections in India, because I pointed out yesterday that elections is going to be an important aspect of the, what you call, the polity paper, the governance paper and polity paper, because of the 2024 year being a Lok Sabha election year. So we are going to see the Election Commission a lot many times in action, and other aspects related to elections have been a little more, kind of in news recently. So that is why we are focusing a little bit upon elections, right? So we are looking at Article 324 to Article 329. And then from Article 329, we move to the remaining portions of RPA 1951, which deal with election petitions, right? And I've already listed you the sections which are dealing with election petitions, which are section 80, 80A, and etc., 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 right? So we'll take a look at that. Article 325. No person to be ineligible for inclusion in or to claim to be included in a special electoral roll on grounds of religion, race, caste, or sex, which basically simply says that no person can be given or can be asked not to vote only because if he is a person of a particular religion, a particular race, particular caste, or a particular sex. Okay, it says that no person shall be asked or allowed or disallowed from voting only because he is of a person of a particular religion, race, caste, or sex or any of them, right? So this is what is an anti-discriminatory article, in terms of people cannot be excluded on the basis of their, what do you call, social status. Take a look at this. Article 326 talks about adult suffrage. Please read this article. Elections to the House of the People and to the legislative assemblies of the states to be on the basis of adult suffrage. It says that the elections to the House of the People and to the legislative assembly of every state shall be on the basis of adult suffrage. Adult suffrage means that every person who is a citizen of India and who is not less than 18 years of age, on such date as may be fixed in that behalf by or under any law made by the appropriate legislature, and is not otherwise disqualified under this constitution or any law made by the appropriate legislature on the ground of non-residence, unsoundness of mind, crime or corrupt or illegal practice, shall be entitled to be registered as a voter at any such election, right? So Article 326 gives what you can call qualifications for becoming a voter in India. Number one, he should be a citizen of India and not be less than 18 years of age. And number two, he should not be disqualified under this constitution or any law made by the parliament on the ground of non-residence, unsoundness of mind, crime or corrupt or illegal practice, shall be entitled to be registered as a voter at any such elections, right? So Article 325 and 326 combined together can in a way give you a sense of what is the right to vote in India, who has the right to vote in India. Now what it says is that everyone has a right to vote in India and no person can be discriminated on the basis of religion, sex, caste or color, in religion, race, caste or sex, in terms of not being allowed to vote, and provided that they are meeting the conditions of adult suffrage, which is citizenship of India and 18 years of age, and they have not been disqualified on the ground of non-residence, unsoundness of mind, crime or corrupt illegal practice, and etc., etc. If they are combining the two of them, you get the point about Article 325 and 326 as an example or exemplification of the right to vote. Okay, then you take a look at Article 327. Now, this is a question that one of you asked me yesterday, that can the state legislature make a law about disqualification of parliament? Article 327 says that power of parliament to make provisions with respect to elections to legislatures. Okay, subject to the provisions of this constitution, parliament may from time to time by law make provisions with respect to all matters relating to or in connection with elections to either house of parliament or to the house of either house of the legislature, right? That's the answer to the question. It says that the parliament will have the final power in terms of making laws with regard to legislatures on elections, be it the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Vidhan Sabha or Vidhan Parishad, right? Please take a look at Article 327 yourself. You had asked this question yesterday, so I'm just trying to in terms of what we have to pay attention to in this regard. Please take a look at Article 327. Okay. Then in continuation with Article 327, you can read Article 328, which is also an answer to the question that one of you asked me yesterday. It says that the power of legislature of a state to make provision with respect to elections to such legislature. Okay. Now this says that a state legislature can make a law on the subject of parliament or on the subject of elections only if that is not made by parliament under Article 327. If a law has deliberately been left out by the parliament from being made, then only the state legislature can make a law in that behalf. Otherwise, the state legislature cannot make a law in that behalf. Take a look at Article 328, please. Article 328. Subject to the provisions of this constitution and insofar as provision in that behalf is not made by parliament, the legislature of a state may make from time to time by law make provisions with respect to all matters relating to the legislature of that state only. Okay, so wherever the parliament deliberately skips on making a law on a particular state legislature elections, there the legislature can have the power to make the law, but otherwise generally the parliament is having the power. The parliament can be charitable in terms of letting its power go to the state legislatures in certain cases. Article 327 and 328. Okay, so let me just put this back in structure. You have, for example, Article 324, which deals with the Election Commission of India, which we have discussed, clause 1 to 6. I would suggest that you read it from the Bare Act. Then you have Article 325, which deals with the no discrimination for in terms of voting. Every person can vote and that person cannot be discriminated from voting only because of certain social status. Then you have Article 326. 326 talks about the article 326 talks about the question of adult suffrage. We've taken a look at the whole thing, right? These two can be considered as the parts of the constitution which deal with the right to vote. Okay, then Article 327 and 328 can be read together as a set, which is Article 327 and 328, can be read as a set which gives the power to the Parliament to make laws with regard to elections, not only for the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, but also to the state legislatures. But in case the Parliament has not deliberately made a law upon it, then in that event, a state legislature can make a law upon that particular situation. You see the point? So this is what the Article 327 and 328 are being referred to as. Right. So from Article 324 to Article 328, we have understood this clearly in terms of our structuring of it. Okay. Now, when we take a look at Article 329, this is where the real, masala lies in terms of election petitions. Okay. As I have been mentioning, or in a way briefly introducing you the concept of election petition, you can understand what I would mean when I say a certain thing with regard to election petition. Okay, Article 329 with reference to election petition. What am I saying over here in election petition? Okay, let me take the questions before I can move on to Article 329, which will be a lengthy discussion. Yeah, so in this part, when I take the election petition, I will maybe briefly touch about what are the problems which are happening at the level of a state panchayat election and who has the power and authority to do what all in this particular situation. Though we are not going to cover the state specific laws because the UPSC generally asks questions from only the union basis of questions, but I'll try to answer that question in one way or the other. Okay. Okay, Bidisha has a question. Can a person owning a company corporation where the central government has more than 25% investment contest state legislative elections? No, it can't. Disqualified. That is under the RPA 1951. If a person is owning a company or corporation, the central government has more than 25% investments, it cannot contest state legislative elections. Okay. In our state recently, a case is petitioned about the nomination of the state election commissioner is illegitimate after the governor signed the file. Now, so will the SEC remove the governor opinion? The nomination of the state election commissioner is illegitimate after governor signed the file. Now, will SEC remove after governor opinion? Can the state election commissioner be removed? Yes, there is a possibility that the state election commissioner can be removed, but that has to be taken by the High Court or the Supreme Court. Okay. Suman, if there is so many rules regarding fair elections, then why never follow anything and layman people have to suffer? In West Bengal, every day so many disturbances, murder, harshly killing people, bombings, all this happening. All the police, special forces are there, but just for showcasing. Yeah. So I'll just try to give you the legal and the constitutional background as to why this is happening. Okay, you've given me an interesting part to maybe elaborate upon, so I'll tell you how we can answer this. How many days the power kept under the hands of the ECI? Days power kept under the hands of the ECI. I'm not sure if I understand the question. The Election Commission of India is in terms of all the matters regarding elections, the only body which can have any power unless a law has been made for giving any other organization or agency a power on elections. If Central Election Commissioner elected by a recommendation of 3 members, Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition and CJI, then why the State Election Commissioner elected by Governor recommendation of only Chief Minister? Because even for the Central Chief Election Commissioner, previous to the judgment of the 2023 Supreme Court, the appointment of the Election Commissioner was exactly like the State Election Commissioner. And second, the State Election Commissioner is only responsible for conducting the panchayat and municipality elections, who has importance significantly lower than the Union Election Commission. So that reform, once brought into the Union Election Commission, may precipitate into changing the State Election Commission also. Okay, but abhi hi to aaye hai reforms. This is only a few months back that this committee has been set up by the Supreme Court. So we are possibly looking for this kind of reform in the State Election Commission also, but we'll have to wait for that till happens. Okay, Shubham, the law by the Supreme Court is supposed to be enforced, and then Parliament made a law that is totally biased and opposite. The Supreme, that's a good question. If the Parliament makes a law and replaces the Supreme Court order and then makes it biased again, the Supreme Court can call it upon judicial review. The Supreme Court can call it upon judicial review and strike it down, calling it a violation of the free and fair elections of the Constitution. So Article 324 mandates that there shall be free and fair elections in India, and if a law is made which is in contravention to that Article 324, it will be declared as ultra vires by the Supreme Court. So the judicial review can be exercised. For example, recently only the Supreme Court has struck down the Tribunals Reforms Act 19, the Tribunal Reforms Ordinance, which positions a search cum selection committee for the for the membership of tribunals, and that has been struck down by the Supreme Court also on the same grounds as that it is ultra vires the Constitution. So same things can happen over here. Deployment of central forces in the Panchayat election of West Bengal, does it mean the interference of union in the state election? Let me just briefly, give me some time. Let me go through the matter completely as to what is happening in the state of West Bengal, and I will try to give you an entire structure and understanding of what is happening over there. Okay, give me today's time and let me come back to it with a material that I can read in terms of really knowing what is the ground reality of this situation. Okay. I'll take special notice of what is happening in the state of West Bengal for your reference clearly. There are so many Baer Acts we have to read. Remember important ones only. How to know which is one word? I'll tell you. That list I can give to you. Baer Acts that you have to read is, let's say for example, Baer Acts number 1 is the Constitution of India. And that too not all the articles, only some articles. Okay, so maybe later on I'll help you mark the articles from the Constitution of India. Then you have the next thing that you have to read is the Citizenship Act 1955. Okay, then you have to read the Representation of People's Act, which we are reading already. And then you have to read the RTI Act. Only these 4. That's it. For the general studies paper number 2, these are the only 4 Baer Acts you have to read. The Constitution of India, Citizenship Act, RPA 1951 and RTI Act 2005. These 4 Baer Acts if you read, you'll be prepared for the GS paper number 2 completely. Okay, within the RPA 1951, I'm already telling you sections that you have to read. For example, section 3, section 4, section 7 to 11 we have read, and the other list of sections I have given to you. Within the RTI also I will tell you the sections to read because it is going to be a part of the governance classes. So these 2 Baer Acts I will cover in class personally. The remaining of them you can take a look at in terms of the Constitution of India, the Citizenship Act, which are both part of polity. What articles have to be read here and what sections have to be read over here. Clear? Biswajit, if Parliament make a law regarding state election after state legislature law regarding election, then what happened if state law declared null and void the state law regarding this matter? Parliament makes a law regarding elections after state legislature law regarding. Of course, if the state legislature has made a law and if Parliament makes a law after that, the state legislature's law can be declared as null and void. It can be discredited completely because Article 327 prevails. Okay, you're right. in assuming that the state legislature, if it makes a law on which the parliament has not made a law yet, but if the parliament makes a law after the state legislature, that law by the state legislature can be declared as null and void. It can be thrown out. That's very clear. Okay, fine. Take it. Let's take a break and then we resume with understanding the question of election petition, and we take a look at the sections of the RPA, and we try to finish this entire structure and start the dictation of notes upon RPA. Right, this is the second part of RPA. So I hope you're getting it. Article, I'm just trying to connect everything that we have covered so far. 84, 101, 102, 103, 324, 325, 326, 327, 328, 329, and then we are coming to RPA, right? So these things by the end of the class today we'll be able to cover, which would be a significant coverage of the governance portion, because then I will show you some questions which are previous year questions which were coming from the same areas in RPA, etc., and you'd be able to practice some answer writing from the main examination perspective. Once we cover the RPA and the election matters, a huge chunk of your syllabus is completely under your control. That will give you some confidence to write answers if you are attempting the UPSC examination in this year or that next year, especially when 2024 is a Lok Sabha election year, and a lot of things in polity are going to be from the election perspective. So we'll cover all of these details very meticulously and briefly. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I will be back in an hour and resume the classes with the remaining portions of the RPA. Thanks.